Okay, this is going back quite a bit in time. This is from October 1971 and was a trip to the Kansas City, Missouri and Kansas area. And after that, I drove up and made stops in Iowa and I made a visit to the steam-powered Northwestern Steel and Wire Company plant in Illinois. I used to work, at that time I worked for the Navy, was sort of Mr. Goodwrench out on different problems. And we had to visit these three ships. One of them was in Subic Bay in the Philippines, and the other one was in Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard in Hawaii. I honestly don't remember what exactly the problems were anymore, but it's kind of moot because all of these ships are now razor blades. Little background here. On the flight to Manila, and keep in mind that when you go to the Philippines, at least at that time, it was 3 flights. Flight from Philly to Los Angeles and Los Angeles to Honolulu, and then from Honolulu to Manila. Of course, we couldn't sleep because of this thunderstorm we hit. And of course, we got to Manila and the bags were missing, so we had to buy extra clothes because it was so hot. And we had to wait a couple days for the clothes to arrive, or I should say our bags to arrive. And that involved a 160-mile round trip to Manila to get the bags. And on the way back, well, actually in both directions, come to think of it, there were checkpoints manned by machine gun guards. And that was because of riots occurring during their upcoming presidential elections. And when we got to the base, that they told us the situation was so bad that they advised us not to leave the base. When we finished at Subic Bay, we returned to Honolulu and subsequently our flight. And we were made to disembark at Okinawa and Tokyo as well, while the plane was decontaminated. That involved the stewardesses going through with some kind of spray stuff, spraying all around. I'm not sure if that was very effective or not. After we finished at Pearl Harbor, I decided to do some Midwest Railfanning, so I called my boss for the okay to take off the following week, and he concurred. But I was going to do it anyway, so it didn't matter whether he concurred or not. Our flight to Los Angeles was fogged in, so we had to go to Phoenix to take on fuel. Of course, that took a couple extra hours, and this meant a later flight to Kansas City. Of course, my bags were missing again, and I didn't get to my hotel until after midnight waiting for the bags. Fortunately, the guy kept my room. And these are the places that I visited while I was there. Day 1. Fortunately, things went much more smoothly this day than it did on the flight coming home, or coming back into Los Angeles, I should say. And you can see all the fallen flags here. I used geological survey maps, which were very detailed, showed you where all the engine facilities were, and turntables were marked on them and everything. So it made it easy to cruise around and see all the different spots where the equipment was. A nice and clean Rock Island unit. Here's one in an older paint scheme. And an even older one. And we're going to see this guy again, as I note on the bottom there, the next day. A newer caboose. And this one was labeled for full service only. Much older. Well, keep in mind, this was 1971, but even so, these were pretty ancient even by then. And over to the UP yard. And these 4 engines were making up a train. Now they're backing up, going to the right out of the photo, and we see another engine up there switching some cars. Now they changed tracks and they're moving over. And now we get a better view of the engine that was on that other group of cars. Now, at the time when there were still so many railroads before all the mergers, or all the most recent mergers, I should say, there were dozens and dozens of transfer runs, and anybody's engines could be seen almost any other place. These are obviously Kansas City Southern transfer. Looks like obviously two sets of engines, and slugs and caboose. Obviously, they still kept them pretty clean. I mean, white would show almost every bit of dirt. Fairbanks Morse. Now, here's something interesting. This bridge back here, obviously a railroad bridge, but I'll be darned if I looked on Google Earth if I could find it. Maybe they tore it down, I don't know. This was just another freight that came into the yard. This is Argentine Yard in Kansas City, Kansas, as were the bunch of previous Santa Fe pictures. Now we're over in Missouri, and the Chicago Northwestern and Kansas City Southern had adjacent facilities, all kinds of equipment here. I wasn't sure whose tracks were whose. It was a little confusing. Nice F unit. Chicago Great Western, cow and calf. And they had recently been merged into the Chicago Northwestern. And this one still retained its original number, had not yet been painted out. This one also was not renumbered. One of their cabooses. Couple Kansas City Southern units. The same pair. Out here, a Milwaukee Road unit arrived on a transfer run. And we'll see this guy again tomorrow at a different place. Another FM. This is a Kansas City terminal yard. Frisco switcher at the same place. It's the Gulf Mobile in Ohio engine facility. Couple of Fs. Guess this is an F3 and an RS1. And this was the last picture of this day. And all I could think of was getting back to the hotel, getting something to eat and going to bed, since I was still on Hawaii time. Oh, actually, this was the last picture. Sorry about that. Another busy day. Another bunch of fallen flags. At the time, I wasn't sure who that guy was sunning himself there on the right. Now that I think about it, though, he's probably one of the crew. And this was just a picture by chance when I was going on the way to someplace else. This was the KCS yard, and here we have a Milwaukee transfer run. And we saw the Milwaukee yesterday with a transfer run at another KCS yard. And the KCS engine in the slug is the one we saw yesterday as well at the Argentine yard. Lots of silos there, obviously. They're out in the Midwest where the corn and wheat grows. This is obviously one of their older paint schemes. This is a different group. Looks the same as the other one, but it's a different group of engines. Now over to the Missouri Pacific in Kansas City, Missouri. I'm not sure why this one engine had the eagle emblem on this side and the others did not, but anyway, gave a little bit of color to the side of the engine. Note that we see mostly EMDs. Now today we see mostly GE engines. Couple switchers. This one obviously is having some technical difficulties. Now I moved over to the Chicago Northwestern yard. Now this guy was a former Chicago Great Western, but it was renumbered to 1016 in the Chicago Northwestern's numbering system, but you can see the number 30 just sort of painted over there. That was the original number. And over to the Frisco. The color of the olds is fairly close to the red on the engine. This was a different Frisco yard, in another area. Wasn't necessarily the greatest view, but I was sort of found it curious that these group of Seaboard Coastline engines would be so far west. They moved a little bit and so I got a better view. Another transfer run. Like that caboose. Well, this wasn't too much after about a year or so after the Burlington Northern merger. So they had all these different paint color schemes. Not yet repainted. But this was a former Burlington facility here, so not surprising to see some of their engines still in the original colors. The stenciled sign on both sides of the pilot there simply says it's prohibited to ride on the footboards. Of course, they were all later removed, so. Wooden caboose. Looks like the door was replaced. It was a little surprising to see this one repainted in CB&Q colors when it was at least a year after the merger. Here's another one of the same type in the BN colors. This is the N&W engine terminal. Taking on sand. Same place. And over to Katy. This isn't the only place that I've seen them run engines from one side of the turntable to the other, sort of using it as a connecting track. You had to watch where you put your feet here. Grease and oil everywhere. And this was the other place where they simply ran the engines across the turntable. This is the Kansas City terminal facility. What this articulated car was doing here, I have no idea. But apparently I found out later it was from the 1936 Denver Zephyr. And it was lettered Denver Zephyr and silver threads, the two cars. And it was, as I have here, it was built as a sleeping car with 3 compartments, 1 drawing room and 6 double bedrooms. And you can see it's articulated. Some additional Fairbanks Morse engines, Milwaukee Road. And they're delivering a cut of cars to the Kansas City terminal. There was so much activity here that sometimes you just be driving from one location to the other and you would find some train passing by or just sitting here as this one was. This is the KCT yard again. And there was a little flurry of activity. This guy went by. And these guys. And there's the N&W goes away, the MKT comes back. No, that's a highway bridge. And finally, last but not least, and this terminal was adjacent to the one where I just was. Figured I'd swing by and see what was going on. Next day, so I made a couple parting shots in the Kansas, Missouri area before heading to Mason City via Des Moines. This is Argentine yard again. Interestingly enough, the one end of this yard is right on the Missouri-Kansas border, and you can put 1 foot in each state. That's the yard office there and tower. Little Alco smoke there. Another transfer run. Then I wound my way around into the engine terminal. And this is over at the Rock Island Yard. And 777 I had seen on Sunday. And that's a gondola on the flat car there. few years later, these Rock Island engines would be so dirty that you could hardly read the road name and the number. It'd be mostly black. And I was hoping to see one of these, and I did. This is the U-50, the GE U-50. And I didn't really notice this until I scanned the pictures, but there's a competitor's truck on the highway there. That's one of my skill shots. Back over to Missouri, and we're in at the CNNW. They have extra large fuel tanks on this group. That's why the air tanks are on the roof. Another ex-Chicago Great Western engine. That's one of the original Frisco paint schemes. Kansas City Terminal Caboose. I like the curved roof. I think that's a neat touch. Now the transfer run. The sign says, note the slippery, it just simply says slippery rails. I don't think you really have to tell railroaders that. But anyway, there's a sign there. Now here we have a left to right, an Alco, Fairbanks Morse, and an EMD. I believe that the Milwaukee and the KCS shared this yard. And as my caption says, this is the next to last stop in the Kansas City area in Missouri Pacific. And I should, as a side note, compared to the way things are today, nobody even gave me a second look at any of these places. There's one of the Trains magazine's business address engines, 1027. They had a thing with that for a while. Now in Des Moines, I was lucky to see the Des Moines Union Railway Company. And there was a Northwestern short freight here as well. Why I didn't go up the street, take a picture of the station, I can't tell you. getting very late when I took these. It's dusk. Now this day, my main thrust was the Iowa terminal. And it's still active as we speak as the Iowa traction. And I was out there again in 2017. And everything looked completely different. This was my first encounter of the day, and that's a sweeper in the distance and these two freight motors closer to me. All the equipment, at least the ones that they were using at the time or would use from time to time in 1971, were kept immaculate. Oh, and I did do some research on some of these, and this was originally built as Southern Iowa number 400. Here's the sweeper a little closer. Driving those photos that I took before were closer to where the shop is. And then I was driving, now driving into town, and came across this guy sitting here. This all looks completely different now. I couldn't, except for the shop itself, the building itself, when I was there in 2017, nothing was recognizable. But you see how really nice they keep the equipment. Now that road now is all 4 lanes, and there's all kinds of buildings and industries on both sides, so. Stub switch. This is at the shop. Now, these 3 were being used for parts for the other ones. Most of these are, when I was back there a couple of years ago, are all gone. And this one was built as Grand River 226 and was scrapped in 73. They were really nice. I told them what my business was and wanted to take some pictures inside, and they said, sure, knock yourself out. As my note says, since I really didn't anticipate this trip, I didn't have my wide angle lens or tripod with me, so you got to do the best you can. There's no missing that orange. Now this car is a former Chicago Aurora and Elgin car. And you can see it suffered some damage to the end there. The shop is on the right. That building is still there. And as far as I could tell, this car is no longer on the property, and I couldn't find any other information on where it might have gone. There it is again on the flat car, and then The distance there is their snowplow. And there it is. Obviously an old flat car with a, also serves as the line car. Now this engine rather, was ex-Kansas City Public Service, and before that, Henderson and Northern. And apparently, the best I could find out, it was sold locally almost here to Middletown and Hummelstown in 1972, who later sold it to somebody else, numbered as number 3. While I was driving around looking for my next spot, I heard horns and went to investigate, and this train came through. And here he's crossing the Milwaukee Road, who goes from left to right. This is still in Mason City. An old RS1, shifting some cars. This is to their other division, their Charles City Western Division, and this is number 30. By the time I got there in 1971, this line was no longer electrified, but this guy was still sitting there. Obviously, you can tell from the curved hoods over the motors, or over the electrical equipment, I should say, was much older. This is the Waterloo Railroad in Waterloo, Iowa. After that, I moved on to Cedar Rapids, and the next day, these were my targets. Obviously, a knockoff of the Union Pacific colors. And this was a former interurban, Cedar Rapids in Iowa City. Now I'm on the way to Clinton, Iowa, where I had planned to cross the Mississippi, and came across this train, and both these engines had failed on the road. And when I talked to the crew, they said a couple of engines had been dispatched to rescue them. So I waited for a while, and here they are. And the forward engine's still in Chicago Great Western paint. And I was glad I didn't have to wait too long, because I had to get moving. And you never know. I just saw these two sitting here on the side of the road, so it necessitated a emergency stop. Now, this is the Northwestern Steel and Wire Company in Sterlington. Story was that somebody told me that the owner, who was a really elderly man, liked hearing the whistles at night. So he decided he would keep the steam engines, and these are all ex Grand Trunk Western. I guess they had about 9 or 10 of them there, and I think 3 or 4 were operational and the rest were used for parts. But here again, I just walked into the steel plant and nobody said a word. And as my caption says, this photo leaves no doubt as to the gritty nature of a steel mill. This was from a highway bridge crossing over. And it was kind of neat to hear the chuffing and the smell of the smoke. This again, I moved back up to the highway overpass. Actually, while I was on the highway overpass, some guy who apparently was a employee pulled over to the side and told me I could get a permit to take pictures if I went to the office. But I had already just about finished, so that was the end of that. Another more general rule. I don't think this facility is there any longer. Now, this guy is on the connecting track to the Chicago and Northwestern. And again, I'm on the mill property here. What they did was they just painted out the 2 first digits, and they just used the last 2 digits as the engine numbers. The one on the left was just there for parts. And this was the final photo at the mill. And I was fortunate enough for the steam engine to pull out, and as he sat there for a while, the diesel came by. This was the final picture. That's the Chicago Northwestern, obviously, west of Waterman, Illinois. And he's crossing the BNX CB&Q crossing. And note there's a semaphore there on the left protecting the crossing. So, and that's it. Back to work the next day.